Right now, your eyes have the extraordinary power to rewrite the biochemistry of your blood without a single pathogen ever physically touching your skin. Picture this. You're sitting around a crowded dinner table with close friends, sharing food, laughing, and having a great time. Suddenly, the person sitting directly across from you stops mid-sentence. Their face turns strangely pale and clammy. Their eyes look glassy and watery. And before they can cover their mouth, they let out a heavy, congested sneeze right over the center of the table, followed by a raspy, wet sniffle. In that split second, no microscopic droplet has actually made contact with your body. You are still separated by 3 feet of open, unobstructed air. Yet, before your conscious mind can even process what just happened, your biology executes an instant, automatic shutdown. Your appetite vanishes into thin air, your shoulders lock up tight. You subtly lean back into your chair, holding your breath as if the oxygen above the table had suddenly converted into invisible, lethal poison. It is one of the most universal, deeply ingrained reflexes of human survival. We react to the mere sight, sound, and smell of sickness with immediate, visceral revulsion long before any physical contact occurs. For centuries, we assumed this dramatic reaction was purely psychological, a mental velvet rope drawn by our conscious mind to keep us from touching things that might make us ill. But modern immunology and cognitive neuroscience have uncovered something far stranger operating beneath your skin. When you see someone who looks or acts sick, your brain doesn't just tell you to step back. It sends a covert broadcast down your nervous system, instructing your internal cellular defense forces to change their behavior. Your immune system, it turns out, can start preparing for biological warfare simply because your eyes registered a threat. Which raises a startling question. Can the mere sight of an infection prime the human immune system before a single pathogen ever touches your skin? If you ask an evolutionary psychologist why we flinch when someone coughs, they'll give you a simple, intuitive answer: disgust and social learning. It's the conventional wisdom we've all accepted. Over millions of years, our species learned that sick people carry invisible microscopic monsters. Disgust evolved as an emotional velvet rope, a psychological bouncer that keeps you from touching rotten meat, drinking stagnant water, or shaking hands with someone whose nose is running like a broken faucet. In this standard view, disgust is purely an avoidance algorithm. It operates entirely in the realm of behavior. You see the symptom, you feel grossed out, you step away. Problem solved. In this logical framework, your biological immune system, the white blood cells, the antibodies, the chemical signaling molecules, is assumed to be a reactive cleanup crew. It sits quietly in the background, completely oblivious to the world outside, waiting patiently until a virus or bacterium physically breaches your skin or enters your lungs. After all, why would a cellular security guard inside your bloodstream care about what your eyes are looking at? A cell doesn't have eyes. A molecule cannot see a rash across the room. It's an elegant, clean separation of labor. The brain handles distance and behavior on the outside, while the immune system handles molecular warfare on the inside. Except nature loves to ruin elegant theories. Because when scientists began monitoring what actually happens inside the human body when we look at signs of disease, they discovered that the brain and the immune system aren't operating in separate silos. They are locked in a continuous, high-speed, two-way conversation. To understand why this neural immune hotline exists, we have to travel back long before modern medicine, long before microscopes, and long before germ theory. For 99% of human evolutionary history, our ancestors lived in a world where pathogens were entirely invisible ghosts. They had no concept of viruses, bacteria, or cellular infection. They couldn't run a PCR test or check someone's temperature with a digital thermometer. And yet, infectious disease was the single greatest driver of mortality in evolutionary history. An invisible enemy that could wipe out an entire foraging band before anyone understood what was happening. In this lethal guessing game, waiting for a pathogen to enter your body before deploying a defense was a terrible strategy. Once a virus breaches your mucous membranes, it begins replicating at exponential speed. By the time your innate immune system detects foreign antigens inside your blood, you are already playing catch-up in a biological race against time. So, evolution built a workaround. If you cannot see the pathogen itself, you look for the biological collateral damage it leaves behind. You look for indirect visual, auditory, and olfactory signatures. pale skin, bloodshot eyes, irregular breathing, skin lesions, unusual body odor, or a slump in posture. This suite of ancestral recognition algorithms is what scientists call the behavioral immune system. It is an early warning radar built from sensory networks, emotional circuits, and motor reflexes. But for decades, researchers viewed it strictly as a behavioral system, a set of instructions that governed where you walked, who you touched, and what you ate. They treated it as an evolutionary story, rather than a hardwired physiological mechanism that could be tested in a laboratory. How do you prove a 200,000-year-old evolutionary ghost story inside a modern, sterile laboratory? You start with an experiment that sounded profoundly unethical. The scientific trail began to heat up in 2010 with a fascinating experiment that sounded almost like science fiction. Researchers brought human participants into a laboratory setting and exposed them to two different sets of images. Group 1 watched slides of people pointing guns directly at the camera, an intense, immediate threat of physical violence. Group 2 watched slides of people displaying clear, unmistakable signs of infectious disease, skin rashes, pox, coughing, and feverish pallor. Before and after the visual display, the scientists drew blood samples to measure levels of interleukin-6, or IL-6, a critical pro-inflammatory cytokine produced by the immune system to coordinate the body's response to infection and injury. The results were shocking. Looking at guns triggered stress and fear, but it did not cause a significant spike in immune cytokines. Looking at pictures of sick people, however, caused a measurable increase in interleukin-6 production. Simply watching slides of disease on a computer screen prompted immune cells to start churning out inflammatory signals. Now, let's be careful here. This early study had a small sample size, just 28 participants. It was a proof of concept, not a final verdict. But it sparked a wave of rigorous follow-up research across Canada, Sweden, and Switzerland. By 2017, researchers pushed the boundary further. They chemically activated the immune systems of healthy volunteers using lipopolysaccharide, a harmless bacterial component that tricks the body into thinking it's under attack, inducing temporary sickness behavior. They then took photographs and collected body odor samples from these immune-activated individuals. When another group of healthy participants was exposed to these photos and scent samples, their brains accurately identified the sick individuals within milliseconds, long before the observers could consciously explain how they knew. Their brains were picking up micro-changes in skin color, facial muscle tone, and volatile organic compounds released through sweat. This set the stage for a groundbreaking 2025 study that brought together cutting-edge virtual reality, EEG brain monitoring, fMRI imaging, and flow cytometry to crack open the exact neural and cellular circuitry behind this phenomenon. And what they found inside the virtual space changed everything. In the 2025 study, scientists harnessed virtual reality to test a precise spatial hypothesis. They placed participants inside a highly controlled digital environment and introduced virtual avatar faces that slowly approached them. Some faces were neutral and healthy, some faces displayed fearful expressions, and some faces bore obvious visual signs of infection. Crucially, the researchers tracked the exact distance between the approaching avatar and the participant's body, specifically monitoring when the virtual face crossed into what neuroscientists call peripersonal space. Peripersonal space is the invisible, highly defended boundary bubble surrounding your physical body, the space within arm's reach, where physical interactions actually happen. When a neutral or fearful face drifted close, the participant's brain registered the proximity with routine visual and spatial processing. But when a sick virtual face crossed into peripersonal space, the brain's reaction shifted dramatically. Even though the participants knew with absolute certainty that the face was a digital illusion, a collection of light pixels inside a VR headset, their neural recording systems lit up like a Christmas tree. The threat wasn't real. There were no pathogens in the room, no germs, no physical contact. Yet, the visual signal of sickness entering the body's protective perimeter was enough to trigger a real-world physiological cascade. So, how does a cluster of pixels inside a headset manage to rewrite the activity of living immune cells floating in your blood? To answer that, we have to look at the brain's internal threat mapping architecture. When your eyes register a sick face moving toward you, the visual data travels first to regions responsible for mapping space and distance, the parietal and premotor cortex. These areas constantly calculate the trajectory of objects relative to your skin. The moment a sick face crosses into peripersonal space, this spatial mapping network fires a high-priority signal directly into the salience network, specifically, a deeply buried structure called the insula. The insula is the brain's master integrator of internal bodily states and emotional salience. It is the bridge where sensory perception transforms into physical feeling. From the insula, the neural signal branches down into the hypothalamus, the central control node of your autonomic nervous system and neuroendocrine pathways. And this is where the neural world meets the cellular world. The hypothalamus communicates with the rest of the body through autonomic nerve fibers and systemic chemical signaling. It is important to note that while the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal (HPA) axis is involved in stress modulation, neuroscientists treat the full downstream chemical chain as a complex multi-pathway network rather than a single linear cascade. In the 2025 study, scientists used flow cytometry, a high-precision technique used to sort and analyze individual cells, to examine what happened to the blood of participants exposed to the virtual patient. They observed specific changes in the frequency and activation states of innate lymphoid cells, or ILCs. Innate lymphoid cells are the rapid response infantry of the immune system. Unlike T cells or B cells, which take days to build targeted weapons against specific pathogens, ILCs sit stationed at the front lines, in your skin, your lungs, and your gut, ready to react within minutes to tissue damage or incoming threats. When the visual perception of disease crossed into peripersonal space, these innate immune cells shifted their activation state. The brain, having detected a potential threat vector through the eyes, sent an early warning signal down the line, essentially telling the cellular front guards, heighten alert levels. Threat detected nearby, stand by for potential breach. It is a stunning display of biological integration, distance mapping, visual recognition, emotional processing, and cellular immunology working as layers of the exact same unified defense system. It sounds like the ultimate survival upgrade. But before you start looking at sick photos to boost your immune system, we need to talk about the catch. In engineering and evolutionary biology, there is a fundamental rule known as the smoke detector principle. Imagine you are designing a smoke detector for your house. You have two potential types of errors. A false negative means there is a real fire, but the alarm fails to ring, resulting in total destruction. A false positive means someone burned a piece of toast, and the alarm screams at deafening volume, resulting in minor annoyance. Because the cost of a false negative is catastrophic death, any well-designed survival system will overwhelmingly favor false positives. It will set its sensitivity threshold low, preferring to ring 1,000 false alarms rather than miss a single real fire. Your behavioral and neural immune systems are built on this exact principle. The brain's disease detection radar is intentionally hypersensitive. It cannot afford to be polite, subtle, or precise. As a result, it generates an enormous volume of false positives. It flags someone suffering from seasonal allergies as a biological hazard. It triggers avoidance reflexes towards someone with a harmless skin condition, a physical deformity, or simply a face that looks tired or asymmetrical. And when we look at human social history, this hypersensitive threat detection machinery has a dark side. The same ancient neural wiring that helped our ancestors avoid lethal infections can easily be co-opted into social prejudice, xenophobia, and stigma. When the brain misinterprets different or unfamiliar as unhealthy, it triggers the same subconscious disgust and avoidance protocols designed for airborne viruses. Now, we must be scientifically precise here. We cannot oversimplify complex human prejudice down to a simple biological reflex. Social bias is shaped by culture, education, and history, and this evolutionary mechanism should never be used as a reductionist excuse for discrimination. But understanding the underlying mechanics of our evolutionary threat detection system reminds us why we must consciously check our instincts. Our biological radar was built for a Stone Age world, where an unseen cough meant mortal danger. It was not built for a modern globalized society where we interact with thousands of unique, diverse human beings every single day. And that leads us right into the central limitation of the science itself. So let's return to our central question. Does seeing sickness actually change your immune system? The answer is a calibrated, fascinating yes, but with crucial scientific boundaries. What we know is that visual signs of infection do not just stay in your head. When an infected face enters your peripersonal space, Your brain's salience and spatial networks trigger a measurable physiological response. Your nervous system sends signals that alter cytokine levels and change the frequency and readiness of innate immune cells in your blood before any physical contact takes place. Your body actively prepares for a threat it has only seen. But here is what we do not know, and what the current science explicitly cautions against claiming. We do not have proof that this visual priming actually prevents you from getting sick. We do not know if this brief shift in innate lymphoid cells makes a human more immune or better equipped to clear a real viral load. A preparatory neural immune reflex is an alarm test, not a guaranteed shield. Furthermore, these studies, including the 2025 VR experiments, were conducted primarily on young, healthy adult cohorts in laboratory settings. We cannot automatically extrapolate these findings to older populations, immunocompromised individuals, or real-world pandemic scenarios. Your brain can order your biological guard to stand at attention, but whether that standing at attention actually changes the outcome of an infection remains an open question at the frontier of neuroscience. Why does this connection matter so deeply to how we understand ourselves? Because for decades, Western medicine treated the mind and the immune system as two separate entities living in the same house but speaking different languages. We viewed the brain as a thinker and the immune system as a soldier. The emerging field of psychoneuroimmunology proves that they are part of a single, continuous, highly integrated operating system. Your brain is not just a passive receiver of sensory inputs, it is a predictive machine. It uses sight, sound, and spatial awareness to constantly forecast what is about to happen to your physical body, pre-allocating cellular resources long before an event occurs. The next time you catch yourself wincing at a cough across the room, or feeling an instinctive jolt of discomfort when someone looks unwell, take a moment to appreciate what is happening beneath the surface. Don't treat your discomfort as a medical diagnosis, and don't assume your gut reaction is an accurate gauge of real-world danger. Your internal radar is prone to false alarms. But acknowledge the extraordinary, ancient intelligence running inside your frame. You are not a mind trapped inside a passive biological suit. You are a unified, living organism, where a single glance through your eyes can ripple through your brain, whisper down your nerves, and wake up the cellular guardians swimming in your blood. If you want to explore more about the strange, beautiful, and hidden algorithms governing human nature, hit the subscribe button and join us at Oddplain. Until next time, keep asking why.